So we are technically a crypto show, and so I want to try to bring it back to crypto in the end. So you are well known as being one of the, let's say, one of the elder statesmen of the crypto community. It's been a very interesting 4 years. You've been through an entire cycle now, and we've all seen an enormous amount of folly, a lot of irrational exuberance that has kind of fallen back to reality, but also a lot of experiments around governance. Some in the spirit of some of the radical ideas that you describe in the network state, and most of them have not succeeded. Right? Even things like prediction markets, even things like the idea of creating coins that represent some kind of claim over some smaller group or some smaller nation. Those have largely failed to hold root or really become big phenomena. Where do you think people have gone wrong so far? It seems that most of the things that have worked in crypto are basically layer ones, very simple DeFi kind of. Some of the stuff that you said early on is like, look, I like that it's there. It's not really my thing. That seems to be most of what's worked. And then NFTs and gaming, this kind of stuff that's less about political organization and more about people just speculating, having fun, buying things that are cool. Why do you think that is, and where do you think people have gone wrong? What would be your recommendation to somebody who's hearing this message and says, okay, I want to do better?
Let me talk about something that we talked about 10 years ago, even before crypto was even a thing, before we were through any public cycles or whatever. Okay. There's an Amazon link that I put there. All viewers of this podcast should go and get this book and at least browse this. Okay. It's an academic book by Carlota Perez, Technological Revolutions in Financial Capital. Okay. This will give you a different perspective because it goes through the past and it shows that almost every single bill, whether you think about railroads, other aspects of the Industrial Revolution, there's like this very common thing. It looks like the Gartner hype cycle. Okay. It's almost like the way that humans innovate. Okay. Technology trigger, huge excitement, financial spike, all kinds of money goes in, crash because most of those projects can't live up to where they're speculated to be, and natural selection event. And then out of that rubble come like one Amazon and one Google and one Facebook or something like that pay for all of the other stuff plus more. Okay. For example, the dot-com bubble is one that people know existed, but some of the folks here were around for that. I was pretty young at that time, but the dot-com bubble was like this. It was bigger, arguably. I don't know if you actually look at the numbers in terms of relative percentage, but there was a site called fuckedcompany.com that just documented all of the stuff. And everything was obviously moronic. Think about Webvan. How stupid that was. There was this thing, people made fun of it. Lol, you're going to get your groceries delivered at home. Cosmo, oh yeah, you're going to just click a button and get something delivered to you in a big city. How about the QCat? That was completely moronic, that you were going to scan a barcode. No normal human being would ever do that. Of course, 10 or 20 years later, we have Instacart and we have Uber Eats and we have lots of QR code scanning stuff. But you needed a whole technology build out to get there. Almost every stupid concept during Web 1.0, during that dot-com boom, did eventually work 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years later. But the only ones that survived, and they did so, with great resourcefulness, were those that sort of were able to deal with this bandwidth constrained and suddenly capital constrained environment. Amazon, Yahoo, Google, it only accepted search queries and returned back blue links. Netflix did not allow streaming at that time. All those things were built for that environment, and they managed to make it through the meteor event. Okay. And so whether it's a dot-com bubble, whether it's railroads, this is just kind of how this stuff happens. And if you have the long lens on history, you're like, okay, I'm dispassionate about this now. I understand this is coming. I have my emotions out of it. And I know there will be a natural selection event. And let me just pick the winners that come out of this. Let me pause there. Then I can say, I do think there are some winners, by the way. I would disagree with you that everything is not working. I think ENS is a huge hit. And that's been kind of quietly working. And that's a very important piece of infrastructure that's going to come. There's an article that we wrote called that John Stokes wrote called the Billion User Table that's at thenetworkstate.com that I think is good on that. I think all this DeFi infrastructure, the composability, even if it was used for financial speculation, much like during the first dot-com bubble, during the first bubble, for example, eyeballs, that was totally moronic, obviously, in retrospect, in the early 2000s, okay? everybody knew eyeballs had been discredited. Okay. Eyeballs are just meaning attention to your site. Obviously, eyeballs aren't money. Haha, stupid.com. Didn't have the epithet of tech bro or whatever then, but they would have used it. These .com idiots are so stupid, blah, blah. But do you know how eyeballs actually became valuable is once people realized it wasn't the same as just offline ads where you show the same ad to everybody, but you had targeted ads, personalized ads, the entire Google machine that came out in 2004, it was like, oh my God, I can't believe you can make so much money on the internet. Even in 2002, the New York Times, Sulzberger's disinformation agency ran about Google in 2002. You know what they printed? They said, Google's toughest search is for a business model. Okay. Now, they were still pattern matching all of the .coms failing onto Google at that time. Google's toughest search is for a business model. And this was like the Sun Tzu thing, where when you're strong, appear weak, and when you're weak, appear strong. Google wanted to appear weak because they didn't want Microsoft to hit them. Okay. So they intentionally were like, oh yeah, we just got to figure out how to make money on the internet. Later in their S1 in 2004, when they were forced to disclose, they're making something like 300, 400 just that year alone. Okay. Google was just destroying it even in 2002. So their search wasn't for a business model, not at all. Right. Point is, it took a long time for people to have the perceptions catching up with reality. Even in 2013, okay, all right, there was an article that was published saying Facebook will never make a significant profit. Okay, 2013. And then what happens is it goes from this will never work, all you guys are stupid and delusional, you're all losing money, etc. And there's like a tiny but where the messaging has to kind of pause and stop. And then do you know what it's going to become? Threat to democracy. Okay? The next cycle is when crypto becomes a threat to democracy, quote unquote, in the distortion, because it'll all work.
Okay.